she said. "Have we been here before?" "Every day," he answered. "You say that each time, and every time you're right." She laughed quietly. "Then it must really be beautiful." He nodded. "It is." They sat in silence for a while. The sky turned amber. The nurse waved from the window. A sparrow landed on the railing near Lena's hand, chirping as if greeting an old friend. She reached out slowly, trembling. "He's not afraid," she said. "Maybe he remembers you," Ethan whispered. She smiled, eyes shining in the golden light. "Then I hope he never forgets." That night, while helping her back to bed, she suddenly asked, "Do you believe people can fall in love twice?" Ethan hesitated. "With the same person?" "Yes." He smiled softly. "I'm living proof." She looked puzzled but pleased. "Then maybe I'll fall in love with you someday." "You already have," he whispered, kissing her forehead. When she finally fell asleep, he sat by the window again, notebook open, the city lights glowing below. He wrote a new line at the bottom of the page. "She forgot my name today, but not her smile. And as long as I can still see that, I will keep reminding her who we were." He closed the notebook, exhaled, and looked toward her one last time before leaving. She shifted slightly, murmuring something in her sleep. He leaned closer. "What did you say, love?" Her lips moved, barely forming words. "You sound like someone I used to love." Ethan's eyes filled instantly. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I still am." The monitor beeped steadily. The night grew quiet again, a quiet filled with devotion. He turned off the lamp, leaving the room in the soft glow of the moon, and whispered the line that would become his ritual every morning from now on. Love isn't about being remembered. It is about remembering for two. The night outside was quiet, wrapped in mist and moonlight, the kind of silence that carries the weight of prayers unanswered. Inside the hospital room, the clock ticked softly, slow, patient, and cruel. Ethan sat by Lena's bedside, a shadow among machines and memories, his eyes fixed on the woman who once knew every piece of his soul, but now stared at him as though he were a kind stranger who had wandered in from the hallway. Her hair, once golden and wild, was thinner now, resting like silk on the pillow. Her eyes, once oceans he could drown in, had turned pale, soft gray clouds trying to remember the shape of the sun. He'd been here since morning, reading from the same old notebook, his voice calm, steady, careful not to break. Though every word he spoke cut into the parts of him he no longer knew how to heal. He had promised her once, years ago in another lifetime, that he'd never let her face a day alone, that no matter what life did to their bodies or minds, his heart would always know its way back to her. That promise had become his anchor now. "Do you know who I am, love?" he asked quietly, leaning forward, hope trembling on his tongue. Lena blinked slowly, her brows knitting together in gentle confusion. "You're kind," she said after a while. "You always sit by me." Her tone was soft, curious, polite, the way she'd once spoken to strangers at art galleries. Ethan's lips trembled into a smile that hurt. "Yes," he whispered. "I always sit by you." He wanted to tell her everything again, about the rainy day they met in the library, about the way she spilled coffee on his shirt the first time they went out, about their wedding vows whispered under flickering lights and trembling hands. But he stopped himself. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small photograph, their wedding day decades ago, captured in sepia and sunlight. He placed it gently on her lap. "That's us," he said softly. "You and me." She looked at it for a long time, tracing her finger along the edge of the photo, then pointed at the young man smiling in a suit that didn't quite fit. "He looks like my father," she said quietly. For a second, Ethan couldn't breathe. He looked at her, the love of his life, and saw nothing of recognition, nothing of memory, just innocence and distance and a universe between them. The ache in his chest was deep, dull, like something old breaking for the 1,000th time. But instead of crying, He smiled. That was what he had learned. Grief, when it's been around long enough, begins to look like kindness. Then, he said softly, forcing a small chuckle, I must have raised you well. She laughed at that, a sweet, fleeting sound. The same laugh that once filled their kitchen when he burned pancakes. The same laugh that carried through the walls of their first apartment when she told him she was pregnant. The same laugh that had made him believe that love could outlive everything. She didn't know she had just saved him from collapsing. He laughed with her, and for a few seconds they were not patient and caretaker, not woman and stranger. They were simply two souls meeting somewhere halfway between memory and mercy. When the laughter faded, the silence returned, softer this time, gentler, like a lullaby that remembered too much. Ethan picked up the small notebook from the bedside table. The pages were worn, the ink smudged, but it was his lifeline. It was where he wrote everything she forgot, everything he refused to lose. At the top of the first page was written, "For when her mind forgets, but her heart still listens." He opened to a page marked with a ribbon and began reading, his voice low and steady. I, Ethan Moore, promise to remind you every day of the life we built, the love we shared, and the woman you've always been. When you forget our home, I'll describe it. When you forget our laughter, I'll replay it. When you forget my name, I'll whisper it until it feels like yours again. I promise to remember for both of us and until my last breath. His voice broke on the last word. He paused, closed his eyes, took a breath, and looked at her again. She was staring at him with that faraway expression, the one that made him wonder if somewhere deep inside her, accepting the answer like a child accepting a bedtime story. Then she looked toward the window where rain had begun to fall, gentle, rhythmic, soothing. I love the rain, she whispered. It makes the world feel clean. Ethan felt his throat tighten. You always said that, he murmured. You used to paint while it rained. You said raindrops were nature's piano. She smiled faintly. That sounds like something I'd say. It was, he whispered. He stood up, walked to the small record player on the side table, and pulled out the vinyl sleeve he kept in his bag. It was old and scratched, but it still worked. He set the needle down carefully, and a crackly melody filled the room. The Way You Look Tonight. The same song that had played during their first dance as husband and wife. As the tune drifted through the air, Lena tilted her head slightly, her eyes fluttering. That song, she murmured. It's familiar. Ethan smiled, tears spilling down his cheeks before he could stop them. We used to dance to it, he said quietly. Every anniversary. She nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. It's lovely, she said. Was it our favorite? Yes, he whispered. Yours, actually. The nurse peeked in from the door, smiled, and left quietly, understanding that this was not a moment to interrupt. Ethan took Lena's frail hand in his, feeling how light it had become, how bones had replaced warmth, but how the touch still carried traces of her old tenderness. He began to sway slowly, just a little, beside the bed, not expecting her to move, but she did. Her fingers tightened around his for a heartbeat, and her lips parted in a faint smile. Are we dancing? She asked softly. We are, he whispered, just like before. Her head rested weakly against the pillow, her eyes drifting shut. You're kind, she said, voice fading into the music. You remind me of someone. Who? He asked. Someone who loved me. Ethan leaned closer, his tears falling onto her blanket. Still do, he whispered. Still will. When the record ended, the room returned to its steady hum. Machines, rain, and the sound of two hearts trying to remember each other. Ethan sat back down, exhausted but at peace in some strange, aching way. He looked at her face, traced the outline of her jaw with his eyes, memorized it again just in case tomorrow she didn't even look at him. That's what loving her had become, a daily act of memorizing what time kept erasing. Later that night, when the ward was quiet and the nurses had dimmed the lights, Ethan remained seated, the small lamp casting a warm halo around them. He pulled out his pen and began writing in the notebook again, his handwriting careful and trembling. She didn't remember our song today, but she smiled when I played it. She thought I was her father, but she laughed at my joke. I think somewhere deep inside her, she still knows. Not my name, not our years, but the feeling of being loved. Maybe that's enough. He stopped, staring at the words until the ink blurred through his tears. He closed the notebook gently and placed it beside her pillow. Then he clasped his hands and prayed. Not to fix her, not to change fate, but to be given the strength to keep showing up. Please, he whispered, just let her remember once. Just once. That's all I ask. His voice cracked in the darkness. The rain outside slowed, tapping gently against the window like a heartbeat. He looked up and smiled faintly through tears. Or maybe, he said softly, maybe she already does. And it's me who's forgotten how to see it. He reached out and brushed her hair back, tucking a loose strand behind her ear, the same way he used to before every kiss. Then he leaned close and pressed his forehead to hers. I'll remind you every day, love, he whispered, until my last breath. The monitor beeped gently beside them, a steady rhythm like the ticking of their shared time. She stirred slightly, mumbling in her sleep, her lips forming words he couldn't quite catch. He leaned closer. What is it, Lena? He whispered. She exhaled softly, eyes still closed. You smell like home, she murmured. Ethan froze. His breath caught, his throat tight. That was what she used to say when he came home from work. You smell like home. He closed his eyes, holding on to that one thread of memory as though it were sunlight slipping through his fingers. And you, he whispered, voice trembling. Sometimes love means being a stranger to the one who once called you home. It was late afternoon when sunlight slipped through the hospital blinds. Ethan sat in his usual chair and opened his notebook, the map back to us. He began to read aloud, his voice steady. It was raining, he read. The night I asked her to marry me. She said no 3 times before saying yes, not because she didn't love me, but because she didn't trust forever yet. His lips trembled into a smile. She wore that blue dress, the one with paint on the sleeve. I told her it looked beautiful. He paused, glancing at her. And then, he whispered, I got down on one knee and said, You'll make my life less lonely. She interrupted softly. Ethan froze. Her voice, small, uncertain, had completed his sentence. Lena, he asked quietly. Her eyes were clear, the fog lifted for one impossible moment. That's what you said, she murmured, smiling faintly. And I laughed because it wasn't the most romantic proposal. A tear rolled down his cheek as he let out a shaky laugh. No, he whispered. It wasn't. She tilted her head. And you were terrible at dancing, she said, suddenly chuckling. Ethan laughed through his tears. Still am, he said. Ethan, she whispered, testing his name like a prayer. Yes, he breathed. It's me. She smiled, radiant. You look older, she teased. So do you, he whispered. He held out his hand and she took it. Slowly, he helped her to her feet. As the first notes of The Way You Look Tonight crackled from the record player, they began to sway, her head resting against his shoulder. As they turned, memories flooded back. You made pancakes every Sunday, she said, and you burned them every time. I did, he laughed. And the garden, she continued. The tulips never grew straight because you watered them too much. Because I loved them, he said. Because you loved everything, she whispered. Even my bad paintings. Especially those, he replied. Their laughter filled the room, defying the sickness. He spun her slowly, and when she came back into his arms, her eyes shimmered. Do you remember, she whispered, the day you said if I ever forget you, you'll just fall in love with me again? He nodded, his voice breaking. Every day, he said. She smiled faintly. Then I guess you've kept your promise. Always, he whispered. Tears streamed down his face now, But he didn't care. He just held her close, swaying gently as the record crackled and the afternoon sun melted into gold. The moment stretched, suspended in fragile perfection, two hearts beating in borrowed time. After what felt like forever, she leaned back slightly, studying his face. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yes, love?" "I remember everything," she whispered. The words came out trembling but true. His heart stopped. "You do?" She nodded, her smile quivering. "Our first kiss at the library, our house by the park, the night you painted the kitchen blue even though I told you not to." He laughed, sobbing openly now. "You remember that? You got more paint on yourself than the wall," she said, giggling. "And I remember the day we lost the baby," she added suddenly, her eyes filling. "You held me all night and said grief was just love that needed somewhere to go." Ethan's knees went weak, but he steadied himself, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I meant it," he said. "I meant every word." She smiled through tears. "You were a good man, Ethan Moore." "Still trying to be," he whispered. "Still for you." Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had no shape here. They danced until the record ended, but the melody lingered, playing somewhere between their hearts. She rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." He kissed her forehead gently. "I'd wait forever," he said. "You already did," she replied with a tired smile. Her hands, still in his, began to tremble slightly. "Are you tired?" he asked softly. "A little," she whispered. He helped her back into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. She looked at him again, eyes heavy but still clear, still full of that spark that made him fall in love all those years ago. "Ethan," she said quietly. "Yes, love. If I forget again," she hesitated. "Will you remind me?" He nodded, his throat too tight for words. "Always." She smiled, that peaceful, contented smile of someone who had finally remembered home. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his cheek. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you, whoever you are." The words cut through him, sharp, soft, sacred. He held her hand to his chest and whispered back, "And I'll love you, whoever you become." Her eyelids fluttered, her breathing slowing as sleep took her again, pulling her back into that distant world where memories fade like morning mist. Ethan sat beside her, watching, memorizing her face once more, the curve of her lips, the lines near her eyes, every detail carved by time and tenderness. He didn't cry. Not this time. Because for the first time in years she had come back to him, even if only for a moment. And that one moment, that fleeting spark, felt like eternity. He reached for his notebook and wrote, "Today," she remembered. "For 15 minutes she knew me. For 15 minutes I was her husband again. We danced, we laughed, we were us." And then she forgot. But for those 15 minutes, love was louder than time. He closed the notebook gently, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you for coming home." The sunlight outside began to fade into soft pink hues, and Ethan sat there quietly, hand in hers, as the night returned. He didn't need more. He didn't need forever. That one memory, that one beautiful flicker, was enough to light the rest of his life. For one moment she remembered, and that one moment was worth a lifetime. The winter sun was pale that morning, filtered through clouds that looked like soft white gauze stretched across the sky, as if even heaven didn't want to shine too brightly on a day like this. The hospital hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, the scent of something both sterile and kind. Ethan walked slowly toward room 312, holding the same notebook he had carried every day for 3 years, the edges worn smooth from his fingers, the pages swollen from tears that had long since dried. Inside, Lena sat by the window, her body smaller than he remembered, her skin almost translucent, the light passing through her like fragile paper. Her eyes, once wild with color, now floated in blank calm. She stared at her reflection in the window as if the woman looking back was a stranger who had borrowed her face. Ethan paused at the door for a moment, just watching. There had been a time she would turn her head the instant he entered, smile, and say his name like a prayer that had never lost faith. Now there was only the sound of the monitor, steady and soft, like the ticking of a clock that refused to stop out of respect for love. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, the floor sighing beneath his shoes. "Good morning, love," he whispered, setting the notebook on his lap as he sat beside her bed. She didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed on the faint silhouette in the glass, her lips parted slightly as if she were on the edge of remembering something important but couldn't to quite reach it. He smiled anyway. That was his new routine. Smile first, hope second, break quietly last. He opened the notebook to a page he had memorized long ago, the one she used to call their forever page. "Listen," he said softly, as if speaking to both her and the silence. "This was your favorite part." His voice trembled as he read. "No matter where we are, no matter how far your mind wanders, I'll always find you, even if you forget me." For a long moment there was no sound except the whisper of the radiator. Then, so gently he almost missed it, a single tear slid down her cheek. It caught the light like glass before disappearing into the pillow. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. He reached out, his thumb trembling, and brushed away what remained of it. She didn't blink, didn't move, but her hand twitched faintly on the blanket, as if her heart had recognized him even when her mind couldn't. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here. You don't have to remember." His throat tightened. "I remember enough for both of us." He took her frail hand into his, holding it carefully, afraid that even love might bruise her now. Her fingers were cold, but when he closed his around them, they relaxed a little, curling instinctively toward his warmth. He began to hum "The Way You Look Tonight," his voice cracked and low. Once upon a time she would join in, off-key, laughing at herself. But now she only breathed softly, her lips barely parting as if the melody was too heavy for words. Ethan kept reading page after page, not because she understood, but because silence felt like surrender. He read their wedding vows, their letters, his notes about every small thing she ever loved, the smell of rain, the color of tulips, the way she'd hum when she painted. He wanted the room to remember, even if she didn't. Outside, snow had started falling, slow and delicate, each flake catching the light like a memory refusing to die. The nurse peeked in and whispered, "She's comfortable." He nodded, though the word comfortable felt cruelly insufficient for a woman fading away in front of him. Hours passed, the light shifting from gold to gray, the world outside turning quiet, as if it too was holding its breath. When the doctor finally entered, gentle and solemn, Ethan knew before a word was spoken. The look in the man's eyes said everything that needed saying. "Mr. Moore," he began softly, "it may be time to start preparing. Her heart is slowing, and—" Ethan raised a hand, stopping him. His voice was steady, calm in the way only those already broken can be. "I already did," he said, "the day she forgot my name." The doctor hesitated, nodded slowly, and left without another word. The door clicked shut, leaving Ethan and Lena alone again, just as it should be. He leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on her face, memorizing every detail one last time. The faint curve of her lips, the silver strands of hair against her temple, the way the afternoon light painted her in gentle halos. He reached out, tracing the air just above her cheek, afraid to disturb her peace. "You always said love was louder than memory," he murmured. "You were right. You forgot everything, and still, she forgot everything, except how to love in silence." It had been 4 months since Lena's passing, though Ethan still woke up some mornings expecting to hear the soft hum of her singing coming from the next room. The house was quieter now, too quiet, but the quiet didn't hurt anymore. It simply existed, like a memory breathing softly in the corners. The world outside had changed seasons since the funeral. The snow had melted, giving way to early spring, and the air smelled of rain and rebirth. Ethan spent his days sorting through her things, not because he wanted to forget, but because he wanted to understand how someone could leave so much behind without ever really leaving. Her painting studio had stayed locked all this time, the key sitting untouched in the top drawer of his nightstand, a tiny piece of metal that held both invitation and fear. One morning, with sunlight streaming through the curtains, he finally found the courage to use it. The moment the door creaked open, the smell of turpentine and lavender oil hit him. Her scent, her essence, her world. Dust floated lazily in the air, dancing in the beam of morning light that spilled through the window. Her easel stood in the middle of the room, just as she had left it. The brush still rested on the edge of a jar of dried paint water. Her apron hung on the chair, and on the canvas was something half-finished. Two silhouettes beneath a tree, their outlines rough, their faces missing, the background fading into a soft horizon of gold and blue. Ethan froze. He remembered this one. She had started it months before her mind began slipping away. "It's us," she had told him then. "When I can't remember, I'll paint us somewhere memory can't fade." He walked closer now. "Have you ever wondered if love can truly last forever?" Meet Arthur. He sits here holding a picture, a ghost of a smile on his face. This isn't just any park. It's a chapter in his story with Clara. Each step he takes is a walk back in time. See this cafe? This is where they shared their first coffee, laughing for hours, and that old cinema? That's where they had their first date. As the sun sets, he stands on the hill where he once asked for her hand, and the memory is as vivid as the colors in the sky. Though she's gone, their love isn't. It breathes in the gentle breeze and shines in the golden light. Arthur knows true love doesn't disappear. It simply finds a new home in our memories, living on forever. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more real and emotional stories. Your support keeps love and stories like this alive.